Hello, hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is your girl Mitzi, and this is Mitzi. Let's think about it. Today we are thinking about cultural process of inequality. Yes, that is a thinker, and that is what we will be thinking about today with luckily my special guest Amanda, who's going to be helping us really think about this in a whole new light. Because isn't that the point? Yes, to keep on thinking. So thank you so much, Amanda, for coming on to my show, sharing your time and your perspective with me. You could be anywhere in the world right now doing so many different things, but right now you are with me. So I thank you for this. So let's dive right in. When you hear the words cultural process of inequality, what does that make you think about?
It makes me think about the ways that we assume the best or worst of people based on social groups that they're a part of. So we're not just talking about how we react to individual people. We're talking about making sort of good faith or bad faith assumptions based on someone's race or gender, sexuality, how apparently wealthy they are or aren't, that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think that's the problem is that like we can when it's one-on-one, sometimes we can avoid the discrimination and we could just focus on the person as they are and we're okay with it. But then sometimes when it gets into a group, it kind of just goes over our heads and then we start putting people in categories and assuming that one person is all of these people and they're all doing the same thing or they all have the same motives, but we have no idea. You know what I mean? We can't do that. So I guess my next question is what makes someone fall into this inequality portion?
So I would say two things. First of all, human beings in general are meaning-making creatures, so we need to make sense of the world around us, and we get far more information coming to us than we can possibly process. And
Yeah.
so, sort of psychologically, you might say our minds learn to take shortcuts and to make assumptions to save us the work of trying to figure out every single individual piece of information we get. So that's not necessarily bad. The problem is when that gets connected up with systemic patterns of inequality where we think that certain kinds of people are good and certain kinds of people are bad. Certain kinds of people are competent and others are incompetent. Some people are dangerous, some people are harmless. So the problem isn't just that we use these kind of mental shortcuts, it's that sort of socially they've gotten mapped onto whole groups of people. And I think you're really right that when we're dealing with an individual, I might sort of encounter someone for the first time and have assumptions about them. But then if I talk to them, I might realize my assumptions are wrong and I might then learn who they really are as a person. And I mean, there are dangerous people out there and there are people who are less good at some things out there. So it's not that everyone is harmless or everyone is brilliant or anything. It's when we make a connection between someone's social identity and thinking something good or bad about them without any evidence about what they are like as an individual.
Yeah, it's like that lack of evidence can truly hurt not only the other person, but it can hurt yourself because you don't allow yourself to even receive the person for who they are. I mean, because they could be someone that to be in your life that can help you with whatever issue that you're going on, but you may reject them because the form that they're coming in is not how you wanted the help or you wanted the assistance. So it's like it really does cause issues because we live in a world where we are literally it's small. You know what I mean? It's Earth. You know what I mean? We don't jump around to different planets. You know what I mean? We don't do anything like that. So it's like we stay in Earth and we stay in our own little area, in our own little town, our own little environment because it's safe. It's known for us. But when we step out of it, it gets a little scary. And I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier, is like we put these presumptions on people and then it causes this issue. So I guess it leads to my next question. What are some faults in the cultural process that are the faults?
Sure. So, an example of how this might work is when we think that a certain kind of like activity or value or whatever is good for certain people and bad for other people. So, we're really, if you think about, say, homophobia, we're really happy as a society when a man and a woman get married. We think marriage is a good thing, we support it as a society, and so on. Lots of people, however, think that if a same-sex couple wants to get married, oh no, that's a bad thing. We can't have that. We should make that illegal and so on. And so it's not that the marriage itself is different, it's that the people involved in it are different. Or another one of my favorite examples of this is when we think about someone in a leadership role. We expect men who are leaders to be strong and take charge and have, strong opinions about things, and we value that. But when women are in leadership positions, if they are too assertive and if they are too take charge, we have all sorts of bad words for women who are sort of not sufficiently feminine in leadership roles because we've made these leadership roles into kind of a masculine thing. And so we have all sorts of nasty words that I'm not going to, say aloud on your show for women in leadership roles when they act too much like men.
Yeah.
But in a sense, if leadership means being a take charge person, it shouldn't matter what your gender is. You should be able to take charge as a leader. So there's kind of that example. We are perfectly happy. Well, I wouldn't say happy, but when say a particular city's sports team wins a major event, and there are kind of celebrations that get a little out of hand, we sort of give that a pass and say it's okay. They're just celebrating because their team won. When there is a protest about some kind of inequality, especially if it has to do with something like race, and there's any sort of chaos or disorder at all, not even violence, just chaos. Oh no, that's a threat to security and safety, and we can't have that, and so on. So again, same action, different reason, different group, differently valued. So that's
Yeah.
that's a kind of way. And if we don't, and one of the problems with the whole fact that this is about culture, about our assumptions and our values and our norms is we may not even realize that we're doing it. So, so it's really hard to be mindful of how we're treating people differently because of assumptions we make when we haven't even stated those assumptions out loud, right?
Exactly. And then we don't realize that a lot of the times people are just projecting out the inner hate, the inner demons, the inner feelings that they have inside of them, and they're projecting it out on people, on a certain group, you know what I mean? On anything that you want to fill in the blank, you know what I mean? Because everyone is affected by this inequality, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter if it's young, old, color, sex, it doesn't matter anymore because you can fall into this inequality as soon as somebody has some bias against a group, and it's very frustrating because the one thing that I'm practicing and I'm trying to teach my children and I'm trying to teach the people who are around me in my circle is that we have to come to a front with people in face value, accept them as how they are and as they are, and allow them to reveal to you who they are. And if they reveal to you like little red flags that seem like okay, danger or this or that, then okay, take that into consideration, but don't just assume that that person's bad. Don't just assume that person's going to attack you. Don't just assume, because assuming can truly get us in trouble. And we have to have that more awareness, and we have to like take a second and recognize, okay, where are these feelings coming from? You know what I mean? And I think that's the biggest that problem is that I feel like people don't give themselves that second to think about what's happening, but instead they automatically walk into a situation prepared to fight, prepared to survive, prepared to defend themselves because of, oh, well, you're in here. Well, I automatically assume. Then it's like, no, it doesn't work like that. So yes, I think that's something that we all really need to take into consideration and really think about this. So how do you in your life practice more equality?
My favorite topic when I get asked that question really is around racism because as a white person, it's my job to work against racism because I benefit from racism. And so I have a moral obligation to work against it. And so for me, the first step is surfacing my own racist assumptions. And so some white people will be horrified to hear me say this, but of course I'm a racist. I benefit from racism and I have stereotypes in my head that I was raised to have. I hate that. I'm trying to unlearn them, but they're there. So
Yeah.
the best thing for me is to start by going, okay, if I read about something in the paper or I encounter someone on the street or I'm in a situation where I'm dealing with something about race and I have a particular response, like you said, it's really important to stop first. So the first thing is to stop, take a deep breath, and go, okay, what is that response? Oh, that's a fear response. Or, oh, that's a contempt response. Whatever it is, to sort of
Mm.
observe it as non-judgmentally as possible, not to yell at myself. That's not going to help anything, but to go, okay, I'm having this response. What does this response have to do with the reality of this moment? And usually the answer is nothing at all. So, if I see someone with darker skin than me running down the street in a hurry. And if my first thought is, oh, I wonder if they're running away from the police, right? So when I grew up in New York City in a pretty race and class mixed neighborhood, it was kind of a rough neighborhood at the time. And I learned some terrible stereotypes. If I see that I'm having that thought, which is a terrible thought to have, but if I see that I'm having that thought, I then can say, why would you make that assumption? Why would you assume that they're running because they were doing something wrong? What if they're running because they're late for a meeting? What if they're running to go pick up their kid at school? I mean, why not assume the best? And so in my book, Cultural Processes of Inequality, which is kind of why we're talking about that book, the main kind of concept I use is the idea of the benefit of the doubt. And so my job is to make sure that I give everyone the benefit of the doubt about who they are as a person until and unless, as you said, they prove that they don't deserve the benefit of the doubt. Now, again, if someone's a bad person, I can withdraw the benefit of the doubt from them, but I shouldn't start by withholding it because of some group they're in. That's the unfairness. Um, if I know nothing about someone except what social group they're in, I should give them the benefit of the doubt in all cases. Then, once I've sort of done some of that work, my next job is to educate myself about how inequality works. So I've studied um, the history and the kind of current sociology of how racism works, for example. I've taught college courses on it. I offer trainings on it for other white people, because unfortunately, one thing about racism is white people have more credibility. So if I teach other white people about racism, they will take me seriously. So I can do that. I can write about it as I have with this book. So there are lots of actions I can take, but all of them require two starting points. One, I need to be really clear that the inequality is bad, it's morally wrong, it's harmful for everyone. Everyone eventually suffers from it.
Yeah.
And then I have to ask, what are the actions I can take kind of in my lane? Like, what are appropriate things for me to do? And then I do the personal work, I do the self-education, and then I try to help other people learn.
Yeah, I love that. I love that because I think it just brings back our power back of our lives and how we can really change the world around us, because there's so many people out there who wants to change the world, but they don't realize that you start with yourself. You start with the way that you think, you start with the way that you feel, you start where your heart is, where do you love, you know what I mean? All those concepts are so real. And one of the things that is real is this interracial. You know what I mean? People are racist in even in race in your own race you can have racism. You know what I mean? And it's basically just discrimination, just to have this superiority complex of just feeling superior over another. So then you say, oh, they're beneath me because their skin is darker, or they're beneath me because they live in the valley and not up in the mountains, or you know what I mean? They don't live in this side of the street, but they live on the across the street. You know what I mean? There's always something to try to separate someone for the superiority. And I feel like that's one of the biggest problem is this illusion that is imposed on so many people that it's real, but it's not real. You know what I mean? It's only real for the person who wants to believe it's real. Because when you go out into the world, into the real world, and you see people working amongst different races, different cultures, different ages, and just communicating and just living amongst each other, you realize everything's in your head. You know what I mean? Like everything's in your head. So it's like when you said you go through those phases and you start processing this, I think that's a beautiful thing. And I also like how you were helping other white people understand this concept. I live in Wisconsin, and growing up, I've always dealt with racist, you know what I mean? It was just because it's like if we're in the Midwest and and there's not a lot of Hispanics, there's not a lot of, blacks. It was just very white. So then as soon as you get bring other Hispanics in and other blacks in, they always start breaking you down from, oh, how light are you or how dark are you? And because in my family, I was considered the darkest one, they always called me Blackie, or they always, you know what I mean? They always shunned me. Yeah, they always shunned me because of that. And it was always frustrating because people always looked down on me just because I was the darkest of the family. And it was always frustrating. So to know that there's somebody in your position who's trying to help people in your environment and in your culture and in your race, just knowing that you can solve the problem by just educating is the same thing that I'm doing. You know what I mean? Like, I'm recognizing that there's issues with the way that people are thinking, and if we allow more of these open conversations, these real conversations, and allow people to hear them and allow people to like embrace them, then it'll be like, huh, maybe there's a different way I can approach this. Maybe there's a different way I can handle this situation. And I think that's the main thing that's why I loved when you brought this topic up to me. You know what I mean? Because when I was reading your description, you were talking about how I'm a white person that helps other white people battle racism, and I'm like, that is real. You know what I mean? People don't realize like that's a real thing. That's a real thing that a lot of people are dealing with because racism is still alive. They think, oh no, racism is not alive. It's dead. Like, no, no, it's very much alive. And if you really want to get particular, you can see it in your own race. You know what I mean? So that's why it's just like people really need to really think about this. So my next question to you is, what is your biggest pet peeve? You know what I mean? The biggest pet peeve. Get to know you, Amanda, a little better. What is your biggest pet peeve in this world?
Um, well, in a way, it has nothing to do with this topic, but in a way,
That's fine.
it does. So
It's
it's actually complicated. Um,
okay.
my biggest frustration really is how resistant almost all of us are to leaning into discomfort and thereby growing personally, growing
Yes.
socially, growing politically, whatever. And so there's a piece of that for me that has nothing at all to do with this topic. For example, I'm in the process of exiting a long marriage, and I've had to do a ton of personal growth work that has been extremely painful and has really sort of forced me to lean into the discomfort. And it's been pretty miserable, which is fine. I know it will all pass. But I look at how I spent a very long part of my life afraid to lean into that discomfort. And I look at how many problems in the world could be at least addressed more successfully if more people were willing to be more uncomfortable. And so some of that has nothing to do with inequality, but actually some of it has a lot to do with inequality.
It does.
And let me talk about that in two ways. One of them, you were sort of talking about experiencing racism even kind of within your own racial context. Well, one of the chapters of my book talks about the idea of collusion. So, what happens when members of devalued groups participate in their own devaluation? And it's horrible, but we have to admit that it happens. And I certainly learned plenty of internalized homophobia growing up, and much of it I've dealt with, some of it I'm still wrestling with. But when we have that in us, internalized homophobia, internalized racism, whatever it might be, it's harder for us to love ourselves fully and freely and advocate for ourselves well in the world. And it may even make it harder for us to be allies to other people. So when we can confront the discomfort of our own internalized messages of inferiority or shame or whatever it is, it's very uncomfortable, but it helps us be better justice workers. So there's sort of that piece that's the part where, I'm dealing with one of my own devalued identities. But then if I go back to the being a white person trying to help white people think about racism, one of the biggest topics, I mean, I literally teach I have a training specifically on the topic of white discomfort and how white discomfort winds up getting used to just reproduce racism. Because if white people get uncomfortable thinking about racism and get all defensive and all immobilized and resistant and all that stuff, they will not be part of the solution. And so
Yeah.
we must be willing to engage with our own discomfort for personal growth reasons that have nothing to do with inequality, but also so that we can work against inequality, whether it's inequality that is against us as an individual or inequality from which we benefit. Um, and so um, for me, that topic is super, super important. And it just
Yeah.
covers a whole range of things. And so much about our world might be better if we could face our discomfort, kind of look it in the eye, invite it to tea, as it were, and say, what's
Yeah.
going on here and what do I do? I even think if you look at the state of our society today, one of the reasons why we are beginning to have some, resistance to some of the bad things that are happening is that more and more people are saying, I'm uncomfortable and I should be uncomfortable. This situation should make us uncomfortable and I'm going to go do something about it. So,
Yeah.
so that is hopeful for me. But yes, I would say people not willing to address their own discomfort is probably my biggest pet peeve, even though I understand why it's so hard to do. But when
Yeah.
we do it, we all reap benefits.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it actually has holds very much value in this topic in itself because a lot of the times, I mean, people are just uncomfortable with the truth that they've believed and the truth that they've been fed for so long that now it's uncomfortable to just now step into the unknown of what is true and what is a lie. And they have to refigure out who they are and what they believe and what they no longer believe. And that's uncomfortable because it's easier to just flow with the boat. It's easier to just go with the waves. It's easier to just believe whatever, oh, my mommy and daddy told me, or whatever my grandparents told me, or whatever that I seen in life. And but it's like we have to recognize like life doesn't work like that. I mean, we try to make it so simple in our minds, like you were talking about. We try to put people in bubbles and little the categories, like try to make our little cheat sheets in life, like, oh, okay, well, you have blue hair, so that means you are this, or you have green hair, so that means you're this. You know what I mean? But it doesn't work like that. You know what I mean? So when we allow ourselves to be uncomfortable and get that discomfort, then we can decipher like, is this a growing path for me? Or is this time for me to move and do something about it? You know what I mean? Because if it's time for me to move and do something about it, you're going to get a little bit uncomfortable because it's like, how do I go about it? Which direction do I go? But it allows you to discover that for yourself. It allows you to find your own type of respect, your own boundaries, your own love, your own everything. You find out more about yourself in such a way that I value what you said about that because I don't think people really think about that either because people are stuck in in their in their chaos, you know what I mean? And they're comfortable in their chaos. And then when somebody stirs up the pot to try to clean it up, they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. Who's told you to clean my house? Nobody told you to clean my. I mean, we've seen hoarders, you know what I mean? You've seen those shows. I mean, and maybe not personally, but like it's there where it's like if somebody comes into your home and to tell you it's time to throw away all this stuff because it's no longer healthy for you. But then it's like you really have to sit with it. You know what I mean? You really have to confront that and find the truth because the truth is really out there. You know what I mean? The truth is very evident, but the problem is that we believe all of the old generational sayings and we have to remember we have to take everything that comes at us like a grain of salt. And if you're not going to make a pot roast and add all whole bunch of salt to it, no, you're going to add the certain amount of salt to your pot roast to make sure it's the right flavor. And I think that's what it is. Like we need to remember that we are cooking up something inside of us that's going to be beautiful for the world, but it's
Mm,
not going to be beautiful for the world if we don't actually take the time to consider it and consider what's going on. And it does have effect because inequality, we can be we can have inequality within ourselves and to ourselves. And that's when you don't have compassion with yourself. You don't have that love for yourself. You don't have that understanding. And then you reject that and you're like, oh, well, my husband cheated on me with this skinny girl and now I hate skinny girls. And it's like, no, it doesn't work like that. Now we have to recognize, okay, how can I work on me? How can I learn to love me? And when you start to learn to love yourself, then other people will realize, oh, well, I can love you too. Oh, you're actually pretty cool. So yes, I agree. I know we kind of went off topic, but I think it still all aligns at the end of the day because it does. You know what I mean? Inequality starts within ourselves. It starts at a very young age when we are growing up and we are experiencing the world. You know what I mean? If we grew up in an abusive household, you already know inequality. You already seen the abuse in your home. You know what I mean? You already seen what's wrong. So I think people just need to recognize and define it what is what for themselves. And when they go out into the world, not use those cheat sheets out for everybody, but you know what I mean? Bring them only out when you are feeling those red flags coming in. So yeah, I think there's a way to beat this racism, beat this inequality in our culture and in the American culture, in the world's culture, because what's happening in America is not just in America. It's happening out in the UK, it's happening out in Asia, it's happening out in Africa, it's happening out in the South America, it's happening out in North America. Everywhere you can think of, we're all feeling this type of inequality because somebody feels superior, or somebody feels the right to say that you don't have value. And it's like, that's not fair. That's not fair for ourselves. So, yes, I love that. So, I guess my question is, if you could have any superpower, what would be your superpower?
Oh boy.
I
My
love asking
s-
this question.
yeah, no one's ever asked me this question. I've been on a lot of podcasts. I
Oh, the
guess,
thinker.
yeah. So I guess my superpower would be for us all to have, to snap my fingers and for all of us to be able to have access to a sense of abundance and to let go of that hoarding mentality, that scarcity mentality that says there isn't enough, we aren't enough. We have to control what other people have. We have to control how people think about other people. Like if we all had a sense of being enough as individuals, being enough as human beings, having enough to share, having enough to make sure no one's hungry, having enough to make sure no one is thought of as lesser than someone else. I mean, I, I'd way prefer that to like being able to fly or see through walls or whatever,
Oh,
I
yeah.
really, when you use the word hoarder, I loved that, and I thought that was a really insightful way to put it. And when I think of hoarding, I immediately think of a scarcity mentality. And to
Yes.
me, one of the things that is sort of consistent across both our own unhealed pain, usually, and systemic inequality, which is a really big thing, is both of them are driven by a scarcity mindset. Either I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, which is sort
Yeah.
of our own shame or self-hatred or guilt or whatever. And then there isn't enough, so I have to hoard from other people. If we
Yes.
understood that there was enough, and if we changed our society, that's the other thing. I didn't get to this before. It can't just be individual. It has to be our voting and the organizations we support, and sometimes getting out in the street to protest it. It has to be electing people who think we could all have enough. So, like, it isn't just individual, it's bigger too. But it starts at home, and then we take out into the world, we join up with other people who believe this, and we collectively make a better society where all of that beauty that you're talking about is visible to everyone and we can stop hoarding things.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I love that analogy. And I didn't even think about that at the time when I said it, but I'm glad that you broke it down and you made us all think deeper about it because that's the whole point, right? Is to think deeper about it. So yes, I think that is beautiful because we forget that we feel the scarcity. I mean, come on. What happened during the pandemic? Everybody was freaking out. Toilet paper was gone, food was gone. I still have videos of walking through the grocery store and seeing it almost empty. And I still and I when it goes to those memory lane and your flashback, I'm just like, I can't believe that we still have this type of mindset because even now to this day, if somebody were to say, oh, something were to break out, what are they gonna do? They're gonna freak out and panic and rush to the store and buy some other thing in bulk packages. You know what I mean? So it's just like, yes, it's this scarcity and it's like this lack of knowing that we are whole as we are. You know what I mean? We already whole as we are. We already perfect as we are. But the problem is that we allow the world and society and everything outside of us to tell you who you are. You are who you are. You are beautiful as you are. You are perfect as you are. The way you talk, the way you breathe, the way that you stand, everything is great. You don't need anything to alter unless you are altering your inner self. And that's why I believe competition is an illusion as well, because there's no competition between me and another person or me or you or anything like that, because it's like there's no point. We're on our own race. It's about bettering myself from my last version. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think that's something most definitely people need to think about. And it sucks because time is catching up to us. And I feel like, Amanda, we can like dive in deeper and deeper into this and go down other rabbit holes because this is such a great topic. I'm gonna have to have an excuse to bring you back on because I love your input. and the way that your brain works, because it is beautiful, and I wish more people would think the way that you do, because just to have that consideration of just changing their frame of mind and just reflecting in the moment, whatever moment that you're in the car, doing the dishes, mowing the lawn, changing your kids, getting ready for homework, or whatever you're doing, you know what I mean? Like, just having that moment to reflect and seeing what values and see what discomforts you need to dive into, and seeing what really matters, you know what I mean? And my goodness. I swear we could dive in deeper. So, anyways, what can be some lasting words of wisdom that you can leave us off with to keep on thinking? Even though, let's be honest, this whole entire conversation is a thinker. So, what can be some lasting words?
I guess I would say that when we strive to love ourselves and love other people, and by that I mean treat ourselves well and treat other people well so that we can have good lives. Um, if that's our commitment and if we put that into action, not only will we individually be happier, but we will understand what the problems in the world are and we will start understanding better how to work against them. So if we start with a clear mind and a loving heart, we can't go far wrong.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A clear heart and a loving mind. Right? Did I said it right? Okay. Yeah.
Actually, I said the other, but they're both
Oh,
true. They're both true.
sorry.
You
Sometimes
need
my
no no
words
no
mix
no
around.
you need you need both clarity and love in your heart and in your mind. So you didn't say anything wrong.
Okay, cool, cool. See, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That is our show, and that is what we have for you. If you want to know more about Amanda, you want to check out her book and all of the great content that she has to offer the world, because how could you not, right? Please go check her out. If you're on my website, just click on her photo and it goes directly to her website. And if you're just listening in audio under the description, I have access to her website so that you can check it out, so that you can obviously continue on thinking. So, with that being said, bye.